Hi, my name is Mr. D, and today I want to take a look at inverse functions. So we have let f of x equal 11x plus 5 and g of x equal the cube root of x. And we want to find f inverse of x and g inverse of 3. So with inverse problems, we want to break it down into two simple steps. When we start off with f of x equals 11x plus 5, the first thing we could do is think of this as y equals 11x plus 5. All we're doing is just changing it from f of x to y notation. And now to find the inverse function, here are the two steps. Okay, so now that we have these two steps written, notice the first thing that we want to do is we're going to switch x and y. So here, instead of y equals, we're switching x and y, so we're going to have x equals, and we're going to have 11y plus 5. So all we did was anytime we saw a y, we're switching it with x, and anytime we see an x, we're going to switch it with y. Now the next step here is going to be to solve for y. So what we're going to do is, to get y by itself, we're going to subtract 5 from both sides. 5 minus 5 cancels. We have x minus 5 equals 11y. And now the next step here is going to be to divide by 11. So when we look at this, we have y equals x minus 5 over 11. But what we just accomplished, this is our inverse function. So to write our final answer using function notation, we know that f inverse of x equals x minus 5 over 11. So this is our answer to the first part of the problem. F inverse of x, we have x minus 5 over 11. Now if you wanted to, you could write this in mx plus b form. You could write this as 1 over 11 times x minus 5 over 11. But this notation here is, or I'm sorry, this form here is sufficient. So now for the next part of this problem, we want to find g inverse of 3. So what we're going to do is we write out, we have g of x is equal to the cube root of x. So what we're going to do is we're going to write this as y equals cube root of x, and now we're going to follow these two steps. We're going to switch x and y, so instead of y equals, we have x equals the cube root of y. And then the next step here is to solve for y, but we have to think about what is the opposite of taking the cube root of something. Well, if we want to get rid of this cube root, we're going to raise both sides of the equation to the third power. Here like this. Okay, if you want to think in terms of rational exponents, the goal is to get this to say y equals. So if you wanted to get rid of y to the 1/3 power, you would raise it to the third power, because 3 times 1/3 would give you the 1, or the first power that you need. So this is another way of seeing why we're raising both sides to the third power. So then we look for the next line. On the right side we're going to have y equals an x to the third power on the left side. So then what we could do is, since we have this in y equals form, remember, once we solve for y, this is our inverse function. So what we could do is we're going to name this g inverse of x is equal to x to the third power. So now instead of y equals, now we could switch it back to g inverse, because we just found the inverse function here. But we want to evaluate this when x is equal to 3. So we're looking for g inverse of 3. So instead of x to the third power, we're going to replace the x with 3. And then when we solve this out, 3 times 3 times 3 is 27. So our final answer to the second part of this is going to be g inverse of 3 is equal to 27. Okay, well this is going to conclude this video on finding the inverse of a function. Thank you all for watching, and I hope that this was helpful.